Hello everyone, Ben here, and welcome to my weekly updates for the 2020 elections and including the 2019 gubernatorial race. We'll go through this. This is going to be my forecast. This is my model's forecast. I'm going to go ahead and explain the model, but remember, leave a like, a comment. Well, any rating helps out actually, so it doesn't really matter if you like it or dislike it. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Yeah, I know. I probably said a long time ago I would never do something like that, but you know, it helps. I'd love to get some more viewership, and hopefully even some subscribers on Patreon to submit, and I'll do a review of whatever election they want, past, present, or eventually maybe foreign even. So the first thing I want to do is explain how my model works, because there has been some confusion about that. I forget who asked about it, but I feel it's perfectly reasonable to be a little confused about all of this. So we're going to use Alabama as an example. So what does this gigantic string of numbers and references mean? Well, to break it down in simplest terms, we've got 50, aka dead even. This is what the Republican format looks like, and this is what the Democratic format looks like. This is just because this is the only way to make the numbers actually work. I had to use a separate formula, but it essentially works the same. It gives us an accurate number because it works. Okay, so 50 plus half of the partisan lean of the state. So for Alabama, we've got 50 plus half of 34.02. A positive value equals a Republican lean, a negative value equals a Democratic lean. Okay? And that should be minus. Yeah, sorry. For Democrats, that's minus. So a negative value, you're subtracting a negative, meaning you actually bring it up. For a positive, obviously, same thing. And it's the same thing here, except it's flipped because of the operation. And all the parentheses are just so the order of operations actually works. Then you have plus the 2016 presidential / party result, whichever you want to use. So the 2016 result from Alabama, which you can find here. Ta-da! And actually, I think even that, yeah. State results, yeah, 2016 results, B2. So that's where you can find that, right? Plus, you go to this page, this just collects the average for each state here, right? So that's what that means. Take it back up to here. And then, since you've added all of that up, you have to divide that by 3 to get the average. That would be the average, right? However, we also have to include a few other fundamentals, okay? This part is fundamentals. This is polling based. When we get closer to the election, probably around December of next year, I'm going to actually double the party average factor. That's what PM means, is party mean, to use a mathematical term. And I'm going to add that in again and divide it by 4. That way I weigh the polls more heavily and probably increase that to this, included 3 times and divide this by 5. That way, after the conventions, that way we're weighing polls even more heavily and decreasing the factor of fundamentals. Essentially, this is my way of, and the reason I'm going to do that is because I think it's probably better to, as the election gets closer, to lean less on the fundamentals and focus more on polls. I don't think I'll ever go above what I've already stated, but for right now, I do have to rely heavily on fundamentals in order to get a reasonably accurate prediction, considering it's very likely that the polls that do exist, I don't think are of very high quality, especially with the extremely high amount of undecideds. Anyway, so the next factor is we add half of net approval, or in the Democrats' case, subtract half of net approval, because right now it's negative. If that ever flips to a positive value, I'm going to flip the operation signs. Maybe. No, it works. I won't have to flip the signs. That's the beautiful thing. Because a negative value for net approval helps Democrats, a positive value helps Republicans. See? I don't even have to flip the signs. Yay. That means I did my formula way too well. Then we add the incumbency factor, the economic factor, and then because I don't want the national environment to affect state level too much, and that will be captured in the state level polls anyway, I do want to factor in a small amount though, because it will affect the state level, even though that will also be captured in each individual state's polls when we start getting those. The reason I am only including the so I'm including this, but I'm not weighing it extremely heavily. I was tempted to weigh it by state elasticity, but I'm not going to go through and copy that factor a tremendous amount. I think that's absolutely no. I'm not doing that. So we just take the net, and for Republicans, we add it. For Democrats, we subtract it. So when Democrats are down in this factor, it'll be a negative value. Yeah, when Republicans are down, because it's, expected Republican vote minus expected Democrat vote, right now we have a negative value. You subtract a negative, you're going to get a positive, and the same thing here, except we're adding a negative value, so you're going to lose a little bit, right? And if this ever flips into a positive value, you can expect it'll help Republicans and hurt the Democrats a little bit, okay? So for the national factor, aka, let's scroll, all the way down. We have the national partisan mean, or the national party mean, or average. That's what mean means. Plus the incumbency, plus the economic factor, plus half of net approval. And the Democrats is the same, except we're subtracting half of net approval. This is and again, for the same reason, right now it's a negative value. It'll help Democrats and hurt Republicans. If it flips positive, it'll be the opposite. So I don't have to change my the mathematical symbol. There are two other factors, so let's go up to the states that currently have those factors. New York, it has a +7 because according to 538, the presidential candidate for each party does approximately 7 points better in their home state than fundamentals indicate they should. On average, 7% better. That means they have 7 extra points. So the only real way to get that, considering third parties generally don't get more than a single %, is to take it away from the opponent, because that's the only way it works out mathematically. So +7, -7. And I could establish a range, but that's honestly too much work, and it wouldn't be useful for the model, in all honesty. For the vice presidential candidate, in this case, we have to go all the way up to Indiana. You get a +3 and a -3 because that's approximately the average amount the vice presidential candidate helps in their home state. When the Democrats have a nominee, they will get this factor. Right now, the model treats it as, well, a generic, and there is no home state. So, right now, Trump is getting, there's an inordinate amount of help. It's not balanced out by somewhere, by someone from a different state. So let's go to the model and let's review. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Actually, there we go. This is a view I generally, there we go, 100%. So obviously Republicans are leading in states that they should lead in at the moment. Let's go down to Florida because that's the it's the closest state, and according to my model, this is Florida is the tipping point state, meaning this is the one that changes the result of the election. Now, obviously, it's not, but it's the closest win for Democrats. Well, the tipping point state actually I think is Pennsylvania. For example, if Pennsylvania were to go red, Florida would go red, and that actually flips the result of the election. So Pennsylvania is the tipping point state, and Florida is icing on the cake. So it's actually Pennsylvania that's the tipping point state, as it's closer than Wisconsin. Pennsylvania is here, and that's a little bit over 2%, and Wisconsin is a little over 3%. And if you go into it, we don't really see any significant surprises. You do look at Arizona, and that is well within 1%. So that is the most likely state that Republicans currently have an advantage in, according to the forecast, or according to my model. That is a state Democrats have the greatest chance of flipping, followed by North Carolina and then Georgia. If you want to count this 2nd congressional district in Nebraska as a state, they also have a great chance of flipping that. Iowa, Ohio, Texas are also, they're competitive, but it takes a little bit more to flip it than just a good lead. By the way, my model says that Democrats are about, this is about a 9%, 37 plus 9 would be 46, yeah, 9.49% ahead, and it's still, I mean, it's a Democratic advantage, don't get me wrong. But they're still not cracking into a lot of these states. Now, this could be a sign of increased partisanship, especially in states that are solidly one direction or the other. And I would agree that's what it is. But I don't expect Democrats to win by 9% on Election Day. And of course, the 2nd congressional district in Maine, with the way with as good as I can guess, it would be somewhere in between, say, in North Carolina and this congressional district flipping. So it's kind of probably it's probably about where Georgia and the 2nd congressional district are in Nebraska in terms of whether or not it'll go for the Democrats. As it is, I'm still having it as leans Republican just because that's as good a guess as I can figure out, all things considered. So let's go to my personal forecast, which is more based off of gut feelings. Yes, I do use this map as a guideline, but it's based more on what I anticipate Election Day to actually be as of right now. And honestly, I don't think anybody should be surprised that as it is, I still currently favor Trump in an election. And the reason why I favor him is because I have to, and again, I think I've stated this before, but in order to avoid bias, I have to treat him as a normal candidate, because if I treat him in anything more favorable to him, as in I treat him as to, slightly, poke fun at his, most fervent supporters, treat him as the God Emperor, well, that's going to induce a lot of bias in my prediction. If I treat him as every scandal is going to sink him, that's going to induce a ton of bias in the other direction, or treat the Russia investigation as something more than, honestly, well, I'm not going to get into what I think about it. If I treat it as Watergate on steroids, like some people are likening it to, yeah. I have to treat him as a normal candidate, and I think this is a reasonable expectation for the Republican for the Republican candidate in 2020, specifically Donald Trump. I think this is a reasonable expectation, considering the factors of incumbency, his solid handling of the economy. Whether you want to admit it or not, most people favor how he's handling the economy. So now let's go to the Senate elections, which are, for the most part, largely going to break down based off of the presidential results. I'm just going to lean states if I think they'll be remotely competitive. I don't know why I already started filling it in, but I did. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to Arizona. Come back to Montana. Come back to Texas. We'll come back to Alabama. And I guess Georgia and North Carolina. Sort of Virginia, but yeah, actually that's reasonable. West Virginia, Kentucky, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Delaware. Sorry, DC does not have a Senate election. Yeah, we'll come back. Okay, so all of these states could be competitive depending on what happens in 2020. But let's go through the states that are unlikely to flip first. So that would be Texas. I'm going to lean it. This encompasses, basically, I think the Republican has enough of an advantage to call the race for the Republican. Cornyn is maybe not popular, but he's not as hated as Ted Cruz. And Beto O'Rourke in 2018 was able to get presidential level turnout in a midterm year, and this is actually significant because the Democrats as a whole were able to get presidential level turnout in a midterm year. Republicans just weren't as enthusiastic. Yes, Republican turnout was up for a midterm year, but it was not presidential level. So you can see, even in states that Republicans won, their turnout was not as high as Democratic turnout. So what this means is there's room for Republicans to improve in a presidential election year, like 2020 will be. And plus, Republicans are going to campaign and talk about how, and they're going to focus especially heavily at the state level. Because guess what else happens in 2020? That's right, the 2020 state legislatures are going to be the ones to redistrict. Next state, we'll talk about Montana. It could be competitive if their governor decides to run for the Senate seat, but I really don't see it. And even in a presidential year, I just don't see the party breaking, voting split ticket between the Senate and the president. If the Senate race goes to the Democrat, you can expect the presidential race to go to the Democrat as well. Virginia, I really don't think Mark Warner's going to lose his seat. It might be semi-competitive, but Virginia really doesn't like Trump and is starting to turn sour on the Republican Party as a whole, partially because of Trump. If we were talking a President Rubio or a President Bush or a President Kasich, things might be slightly different. New Hampshire, I'm going to lean towards the Democrats right now. Maine is peculiar. I think they're using ranked choice for the Senate, and that would probably be bad for Murkowski. I'm actually leaning this one towards the Democrats because they use ranked choice voting. But Murkowski is also not hated and somewhat popular in the state, so she could easily win it. That's why I'm not rating it more than a lean. I don't think the presidential and Senate elections go different directions in North Carolina or Georgia. Colorado, I think Cory Gardner's gonna lose. He'll keep it very close. He'll keep it close and competitive, but I just don't think he's gonna win it. So we go to Michigan and Minnesota. Again, I think they're going to go with the presidential result. So I'm expecting Democrats to win those states. Michigan might get a split result if John James runs and the state is closer than we expect. I'm only leaning these because they're probably going to be competitive at the very least. Iowa, again, I expected to go with the presidential result. Arizona, same thing. And Alabama, Doug Jones is pretty much going to lose that seat. So what winds up happening is Democrats wind up picking up 2 to Republicans 1. Mississippi has an undetermined incumbent. Likely Cindy Hyde-Smith is going to win, but her public hanging comment really hurt her, and is probably looked poorly upon by Mississippi more than Mike Espy's, let's just say, infamous company of a dictator and also taking bribery charges and receiving improper gifts. Let's be honest, in Mississippi, making a public hanging joke is a terrible idea. I mean, it's a terrible idea in general, but... So I'm going to leave this kind of separate. But if Hyde-Smith wins this race, it's safe Republican. If she doesn't, I'm going to only lean it Republican. It just really depends. For now, I'm going to put this as a solid Republican because under normal circumstances, that's what it should be. So now we go to the governor's races for 2019, and what we have is Kentucky, Mississippi, Louisiana. I expect Mississippi to stay Republican. Louisiana to stay Democratic, and it's not going to be competitive. Bell Edwards is popular, and Louisiana is kind of not pleased with the Republican Party at the gubernatorial level because of Bobby Jindal. And again, incumbency is a hell of a drug. And then you go to Kentucky, where, yes, their Republican governor is unpopular. The problem is, partisanship and incumbency combined are even more of a drug. Okay, I really don't see this, unless the Democrats somehow manage to nominate Jesus. They're like literally Jesus. I really don't see this as going to the Democrats unless something really weird happens, like in Alabama in 2017, or if, basically Alabama 2017 happens in Kentucky and the Republican just kind of messes up. Anyway, thank y'all for watching. Hope y'all enjoyed. A link to my my model so that you can download it, copy it, download it, and then edit it will be in the description, as well as a link to my Patreon, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, hope y'all enjoyed. Have a nice day. I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy. Bye.